What is up, you guys? Good evening, everybody. So, Pierre Poilievre just dropped his platform, and this particular show tonight, I wanted to have this for you guys. Don't worry, I still have a video where I'm going to give you my considered opinions about this particular platform, but this one's meant for you guys. I really want to hear about what you guys think about this platform that Pierre Poilievre just dropped. While you guys are joining here, there's already two comments. So while I was trying to set up the stream here, BB says no, PP does not have a better platform. He has slogans. And Fraser Sloan says, LOL, literally a pet rock would have a better platform than Mark Carney. Oh my goodness. He torched him there. He torched him hard. Anyways, so here's what I want to do today. All right, as people are joining here, I want to know. Just say hi to me on the chat so I know who's watching. I'm gonna start. As I said, I want this particular show this evening to be about you guys. I want you to tell me what you think of the platform. I'm gonna obviously play you some snippets of it, and we'll go through the platform, just basically a little bit line by line, and compare between the liberal and the conservative platform, because as you guys know, we didn't really get to look at the liberal platform because it came after the debates. It actually pisses me off that they make these platforms come out like after the debates. You know what I would have loved? I would have loved if these platforms, like, imagine if we knew before the debates that Mark Carney was going to add 225 it was going to add $225 million to the deficit, right? Imagine if we knew before the debates that Pierre Poilievre was also going to operate a deficit, right? Like, that would have been good information to have before the debates. But this is what we got, right? Don Max says, looking forward to your opinion. I'm looking forward to yours, mate. I want to hear your opinion, Donnie Mac, my guy. Anyways, here goes. Let's listen to what Pierre Poilievre had to say this morning. Sorry, I couldn't be live earlier because I was at work. When I saw this, I was like, oh, what is going on, my guy? Yeah, it was all kicking off. But I'm gonna show you guys. I'm gonna share that Pierre Poilievre video right now, in case some of you might not have seen that. So it might be easier to do it that way. Here's where I want to start. I want to start from in the beginning of this particular, when Pierre Poilievre announced his platform, he started with this really scary story that I want you guys to hear it. And kind of like, whoa, like he described Canada in a dystopian future. Listen to this real quick.
Est une promesse qui est maintenant brisée par des libéraux.
I don't want to,
Après les décennies perdues des libéraux, les Canadiens n'ont plus les moyens de faire leurs épiceries. Donc, on ne peut pas reckless spending. He will add $130 billion more. Spending that will drive costs higher for food, housing, and everything else. Spending that will risk our economy and threaten our future. It's not that Mark Carney is as bad as Justin Trudeau. He's far more costly. We also learned from media reports that the Carney platform was already written for Justin Trudeau. So Mr. Carney has the same Liberal MPs, same Liberal ministers, same Liberal platform, and you will get the same disastrous Liberal results. And it is a very dangerous future if the Liberals get their fourth term. And this isn't just my words. It's Mark Carney's own government department. Just a week ago, we learned that one of the departments of the government, the Privy Council office, has made some very depressing predictions about the way the country is headed after a decade of Liberal rule. I'm going to quote directly from this Privy Council report. In 2040, upward mobility is almost unheard of in Canada, they predict. Hardly anyone believes they can build a better life for themselves or their children through their own efforts, and many worry about sliding down the social order. It forecasts more people may struggle to afford rent bills, and groceries. Resulting stress could worsen mental health challenges. This would increase demand for social services. And then there's some specific forecasts that the current Liberal government is making about our future. In 2040, owning a home is not a realistic goal for many. Inequality between those who rent and those who own has become a key driver of social, economic, and political conflict. The report goes on to say that people may lose faith in the Canadian project altogether. It forecasts that many will leave the country to avoid this rising cost and declining opportunity. And they believe that it will lead to a mental health crisis. More people will emigrate to jurisdictions where they believe upward mobility and or higher standards of living are easier to obtain. Quote, if young workers leave Canada, it may become harder to pay for the systems that support a growing number of older people. It says things are so bad that, and this is a quote, I'm quoting from the government here. If I had said this myself, you would have thought it was outlandish, but this is the government's own predictions about how bad things are headed right now. People may start to hunt, fish, and forage on public lands and waterways because they can't afford groceries anymore. This isn't my prediction. This is where the country is headed if we continue down the Liberal track. It sounds incredible, something from the post-apocalyptic TV show like Fallout or The Last of Us, but this is the forecast from Prime Minister Carney's own government department, the Privy Council office. Now,
okay, I want to stop there for now. What do you guys think about this Privy Council prediction? Because I don't know about you guys, but when Poilievre started with that, it gave me the absolute chills, because I was sitting there going like, whoa, could this really happen? like I don't know. What do you guys think about this whole story? Do you think, from where Canada is at right now, do you really think that it could get so bad that by 2040 people are gonna have to like literally like forage off like public land and poach in order to survive, right? So like I'm kind of curious. What do you guys think about that? Kobe says yes, Poilievre has a better budget. Don't worry, we'll get into that. I just wanted to kind of get the initial thing from what Poilievre actually said, and then we'll go deep into the actual budget, because I want to hear from you guys on this. This one's all about you guys for sure. While you guys are collating your thoughts on the whole Privy Council thing, personally, I think I don't like these kinds of things, because if someone tells me the worst case scenario, like, well, shit can always happen, right? Right? What happens if Russia drops a nuclear warhead on all our heads in 40 years? What happens if, what happens if this country is no longer here? What happens if the US takes over? Like, what is the whole point of but I get it from the perspective of Pierre Poilievre's story, in terms of it's a scary prospect if we continue down this track. And maybe we don't get to that point where, people are robbing of public land in order to survive. But still, it's a scary story. We need to correct course. That's the main thing. I don't want to talk too much. Let's get into what he then says after that.
Mr. Carney plans to continue the very policies that got us into this mess in the first place. In fact, he plans to go even further. $130 billion of additional spending above and beyond what Justin Trudeau had already promised will take the new debt that Liberals are projected to add over the next 4 years to $250 billion of inflationary, cost-driving spending that threatens our social programs and our future. Monsieur Carney n'a non seulement maintenir toutes les dettes.
All right, I'm just going to skip the French because I don't speak. I'm just going to skip the French because I don't speak good enough French for this to make sense for me to keep playing French. But Don Mac says, I am a concerned Canadian who believes my beautiful land has been poisoned and is in need of major healing before it fractures and is unrepairable. Wow, that is bleak. That is very bleak. You know what I want to do, actually? Poilievre doesn't really end up saying too much about the actual numbers. So what I'm going to do is, instead of showing you guys the video, what I'm going to do is I will show you instead the budget itself that Pierre Poilievre presented. So where is it now? It is right here. So this is the CPC platform. You guys can see this. Yeah, you can see it. So this is the CPC platform. The most important thing that I want you to see here is this table right here. When you have to scroll all the way down, it's 30 pages, so it's pretty long. But right here, right here, why is it so far? It says a lot of things, but the really important thing that you should see, if you guys haven't seen this yet, maybe I'll copy the link and paste it in the chat for you guys if you wanted to go check it out yourself. But so what does Pierre Poilievre have here? So he has a revenue side in the budget here where he says he breaks down a whole bunch of things, and obviously the big number that you see here is this 20 billion from tariff revenue, which he projects that we can get in the first year. And obviously he doesn't put any more numbers afterwards, because we're only projecting that we'll have tariffs in this first year with the US, right? So and to be fair, that number is exactly the same thing that the liberals have in their own platform as well. The interesting thing that mainstream media like, okay, I just got told by somebody who's watching, a friend of mine just told me that I'm echoing. Am I echoing to you guys, the rest of you that are online right now? If you just let me know real quick, maybe I can see if I can fix that for you. Do I sound all right? Okay, I'm just going to proceed for now, because I don't know that I can fix that right now. But anyways, so he then puts in together all these, obviously all the stuff that he has already promised. He'll scrap the capital gains tax. He'll axe the GST on all new homes under $1.3 million. Okay, so the important bit of this is how Pierre Poilievre is generating some revenue. He's generating all these positive numbers, means he's making money. Negative numbers means he's losing money. And then when you sum that up, with all the savings, and in the second page here, he's actually restructuring the spending of the government. When you sum that up, Pierre Poilievre is going to be operating a deficit of $100 billion of $100 billion in his own platform here. Now, if you want to compare, as you probably know right now, because we've seen that in the news, Mark Carney is promising a deficit of $130 billion on his own side. So right away, Pierre Poilievre is more fiscally responsible, because with Mark Carney, obviously you're adding up the fact that he's continuing with some of Trudeau's programs, and that debt goes up to as high as $225 billion. So obviously here, Poilievre is being a lot more responsible. Well, so here's where it gets interesting, right? Here's where it gets interesting. So I will draw your attention to the fact that here, Mark Carney is talking about, he has done a little bit of math that it depends on how you want to look at this. Pierre Poilievre says he adds revenue gain from capital gains measures. So he has put some revenue on that. He also says revenue gains from EV mandates, and he has also added revenue gain from axing the carbon tax in full, and he's put numbers on that. Now, personally, I don't think you should do the math that way. but it's allowed under the rules. It depends on which perspective you choose to look at budgeting from, right? But he has put some numbers that maybe you can consider. Grant Johnston said, how can anyone fall for anything PP says? But you got to tell me, though, which part of his platform do you have a problem with? You got to tell me. As I said, I want you guys' opinion because I am going to do a video after this for you guys with my opinion. So I want you guys. But don't just say how can anyone fall for what PP says. Well, what did he say? What's wrong with what PP said? Anyways, so on the revenue gain side, I obviously those numbers of, if we're being honest, and that's what I try to be with you guys. That revenue aspect is optimistic. He has put numbers on something that you can't necessarily foresee, right? That's just the truth of that. And obviously, he initially told us that he was going to operate. It was not going to operate a deficit, but he is. Now, I don't know how that eventually works out. In the end, if it goes above, because that's the other problem with these platforms, right? A lot of times, the platform doesn't necessarily match up with. If you doubt me, just go check what Trudeau did with his costed platform. The platform doesn't always match up to what they actually do. Like the platform, according to from the fall economic statement last year, the one where Christian Freeland resigned, there was that particular fall statement was not supposed to have a deficit higher than 42 million or something like that. I'm putting that number from my head or something. But then it went up to 62 instead, right? So a lot of times these platforms are exactly just that. They don't necessarily represent what will actually happen, but they're useful for telling you what direction the government is going to go. So that's what Poilievre showed. But I want to know from you guys though. Here, what I'm going to show you guys next is Mark Carney's platform, and you guys can tell me what problems you have with Mark Carney's platform. So Grant Johnston says PP is lying. He claims that he's for labor rights when his whole time in office has been against unions and labor rights. It's all there for people to see on the net. PP is a bad joke. And that's maybe something, to be fair, that a lot of the people that are against Pierre Poilievre I've kind of noticed about this platform. It's still up there for you guys, but obviously there's not as much. We already know that he emphasizes on private investment. The idea is to create an environment where private investment can come in, right? Get the government out of the way, cut the red tape, cut the bureaucracy. That's what Pierre Poilievre is about. But also, obviously, in this particular platform, I will say what I noticed, and don't worry, we'll get into the liberal platform, and you guys can cut that as much as you want later. I just want to get some opinions here. On Pierre Poilievre's side, he doesn't, and maybe I don't know if I've missed this, just looking quick through it, but I do not see any support for workers, which is something that Grant Johnston is pointing out, that suggests that there's a suggestion there that Pierre Poilievre is against labor and labor rights and that kind of thing. What Pierre Poilievre has said is that he will direct the tariff response towards supporting workers. That's what he has said. But he truthfully hasn't actually put that in his platform in terms of how that money is going to be dispersed. Says, Madam, I've told you got to change this handle of yours. I can't read that. It's so long. Anyways, she says, is it possible to achieve this? Is it feasible, or are we being gaslighted? Here's the thing. Platforms, as I told you, hardly ever match up to what actually happens. And while he's showing you a savings here, I've pointed out that there are some parts of those numbers that are, I wouldn't go as far as saying pie in the sky. They're not, but they are optimistic. They rely on things working out. But what if things don't work out, right? What if we have a pandemic again? What happens then, right? His platform doesn't necessarily take into cognizance the fact that we're in a situation right now where shit we could be in a recession. Some people are saying we're already in a recession, right? Well, if we're not, say President Trump continues to do wild things, we might be in a recession. And his platform, in my opinion, doesn't necessarily take that into cognizance. You know, he's depending on private investment in a time of crisis. I don't know that you can marry those two ideas. Jamie says here, who in here is not for protecting women or paying lower taxes? I'm for paying lower taxes. Who's not for protecting women? To be fair, I don't know that. I don't know that Poilievre I think that's a big charge to level at Pierre Poilievre. I don't think he goes as far as saying he wouldn't protect things like abortion rights or things like that. Obviously, the liberals are a bit more progressive on that end, and you will see that Mark Carney puts things like IVF treatment or something in his platform. Jamie says cutting taxes isn't for workers. Okay, so when you're cutting taxes, that means you're making money, right? That means so when you're paying taxes, that means you're making money, right? Problem is, if you're laid off, you know, those kinds of supports is what I mean when I'm talking about supports for workers. That's what I mean there. Jamie was saying, what has worked out for Canada in the last 8 years? That's a very Jamie's going off in the chat over here. Jamie's going off in the chat. What has worked out for Canada in the last 8 years? That's a good question. Does nobody have any good things to say about Canada in the last 8 years? That's wild, you know. Anyways, it's fair. We have gone through some tough times financially. I'll read the comments soon. Okay, so Stephen Jolly, I see your comment. I'll read it soon. Okay. Jamie says, what has worked out for Canada in the last 8 years? If someone could tell me what they feel like has worked out, some people will tell you that cannabis was Trudeau's crowning achievement. You know, I'm waiting for somebody to call me on that. I'm just teasing you guys. Some people, you guys got cannabis and you guys got cannabis and within the last 8 years. That was Trudeau's crowning achievement, didn't you? You guys are gonna stay. You guys are gonna be here and complain about that? Come on, guys. Grant Johnston says, do y'all now see how similar he is to Trump? So he's talking about how similar Pierre Poilievre is to Trump. I mean, can it be any more clear for y'all? Why are you talking like an American, Grant? Y'all. Anyways, that's an interesting statement, though. That's an interesting statement. Jamie's popping off in the chat talking about Jamie says, I still don't buy from my dealer. Come on, dude. Don't be like that. Anyways, I want to go back to what Grant Johnston said. Grant Johnston says, do y'all do y'all not see how similar he is to Trump? I'm not going to lie, the policies are very similar to Trump, but I've always been the first to say Pierre Poilievre doesn't run as far right as Trump. Or at least not in his public facing persona, because he knows if he goes as far as saying some of the shit that Trump says, he ain't getting in. He's not getting elected. So at least on the front facing side, on the PR side, he's not like Trump, I would say. And Stephen Boateng says he is not Trump. Only liberal candidate using scary tactics to scare low IQ Canadians. See, this is the problem I have with Poilievre supporters. You guys don't need to be so aggressive. Why are you calling people low IQ for, man? Come on, Stephen. Come on. You don't need to be that aggressive. Anyways, so R says, I don't think PP is similar to Trump. They are different. I think he's real, but just because he is the way he is does not mean he is like Trump. That's very interesting. That's very interesting. You know, there are some differences for sure between Trump and Poilievre, but you will admit that the policies in terms of like cutting taxes, trying to, in this particular iteration of Trump, finding efficiencies and that kind of stuff is very similar. And Poilievre doesn't help his case when he talks about things like cutting foreign aid and all of that stuff. They're very, very similar. And Jamie's asking, are all of Trump's policies bad? I don't think, or I wouldn't say all of Trump's policies are bad. I don't like his approach, and I'll be honest with you. I've never been a fan of Trump's approach. I think he gets into he tends to do things the wildest way possible, and sometimes and from where I'm sitting right now, there's a chance that a lot of that is going to blow up in his face. I do not like his methods. But in terms of whether he's obviously in his first term, people are talking about he did do well economically. Whether that will translate in this particular term, we'll just have to see. Right now, it's obviously not so good. I need to catch up on your comments here. So someone says, Grant Johnston says, ask yourselves why Musk and Vance like PP so much. Well, obviously that one's simple. He does have a similar ideology to them. But you know what's real sneaky that you guys might have missed? Mark Carney actually is a sneaky conservative kind of guy. You guys, if you close your eyes for a second and just imagine everything you know about Mark Carney, he is a kind of a sneaky conservative, like when you think about it, he's like religious. He's a Christian, which is usually a thing with the, at least the Republicans in the US. He's religious. He believes in pragmatism, which some might say is kind of a conservative ideal. He is obviously well, I wouldn't say well, in this particular campaign, he says he's open to pipelines, but I'm sure somebody's going to tell me that that's fake right now. I need to catch up. Nick Frost says, my family is talking about Trump and Pierre like they are a savior and not a candidate, and that concerns me. If Fox News is backing Pierre, that alone gives me a hesitation. Yeah, that's the other thing I don't like. I do not like Fox News. Just and you know what? I want to use that to jump into something else, because Poilievre obviously is following through with this idea of defunding the CBC. It's in his platform right there. Do you guys support the idea of defunding the CBC? Because I think about it and I go, defunding the CBC could easily become something where we have a Fox News and a CNN, those versions here in Canada. And I wonder what you guys think about that. You can let me know that in the chat, but I'm gonna read your comments here. Grant Johnson says, PP is the Maple MAGA version of Trump. Absolutely. Well, I mean, some people might tell you that there's nothing wrong with that, because if he's able to put Canada first, bring some resource development and really, really improve government efficiency here in Canada, what's wrong with that? Some people might say, what's wrong with that? Obviously he's not swinging with same kind of stick that Trump is swinging. But some people might say, what's wrong with that? So Trevor says, Canada's economy and state of living for the general public has always been better under a conservative government. Look at unemployment rates. Look at the dollar trend compared to what government? That's pretty interesting. Well, here's another way of looking at that. And I'm just playing devil's advocate here. Yes, you can say that per capita GDP is low, but in general, according to the stats, this is a stat I've seen before. The general level of poverty in Canada has actually decreased under the Liberals in the last 9 years. So while you might say that, in general, it's the standard of living is better under the Conservatives, you could argue that that's better. It's only better for a few people, and it's a bit more spread out because of maybe the focus on social programs under the Liberals. Okay, so that's another way to look at it. Says Trump isn't all bad, and if PP is similar, he is similar to all the good parts. Whoa, that's a lot of love you're showing, Pierre Poilievre there. Stephen Boateng says, I'm not aggressive. I'm not a PP supporter. I just think we need change, and Liberals aren't seeing it. I have voted for Liberals in the past, and my first Conservative voter was Harper. Okay, Stephen. So, Banyak Precision says, Conservatives compare more easily to other Conservatives, and Liberals compare. Okay. All right. If you want to clarify that for me, what you mean there. Trufer says, vote for Pierre. Don't just drop a vote for Pierre. The bots can do that. Come on, give me a bit more. Banyak Precision says, it depends what side you're on, if that is good or bad. Okay. You got to help me with these. Jamie says, Musk and Vance like him so much because he has common sense. What else do you need? Honestly. Okay, that's funny. Solomon Ajay says, yes. I'm just going to get through the comments and then we'll go look at the... Actually, there was something else I wanted to show you guys in the Conservative platform before we go look at the Liberal platform. Solomon Ajay says national media should not be that biased. So I guess that's your response to my question about defunding the CBC. Honestly, and I'm going to stick to what I've always said. I don't ever want to see a situation where our news media becomes like Fox News and the CNN. I think that is not useful to anybody. It is absolutely trash. Like I watch Fox News for entertainment and not for information. That's not useful. So I personally would love to see the CBC reformed so that they can serve the people better. Because you're right, the CBC should not be biased, and to some extent, the CBC tries to appear like they're not biased, but obviously, if you listen to them long enough, you can tell that they are. But for me, I don't think that that's the way to go. I think there is some good in the CBC. I listen to them quite a bit, as you would imagine, for what I do here. So I think you reform the CBC. I don't think you should outright shut it down. And Grant Johnston says, funny how conservatives always cut military, then complain about liberals cutting military when in fact they are increasing military spending. So it turns out both of them are spending about the same actually on military in their platforms here. I think what I saw, the conservative, I think Poilievre is spending about 17 million. I want to say, let me go back there and see what it says. Ooh, I hate these. It's hidden somewhere in here. Someone's gonna tell me what the number is. I can't seem to find it right now, but I don't want to do that while I'm on with you guys. But they're spending roughly about the same on the military. So in this particular case, you can pick or choose which of them is spending on the military more. But I think that at this particular point, we all understand that we need to meet our 2% NATO defense spending target, and I'm happy to see that coming from both parties in this particular election. Nick Frost says conservatives tend to think nearly every news outlet is fake. I hate that actually. I hate that there's this, but Okay, let me just finish your comment and then I'll tell you what I what I think. You can tell I get really passionate about these things. Conservatives tend to think nearly every news outlet is fake. If they can prove the CBC is pushing misinformation in court, then yes, defund it. Otherwise, good luck with that. So the CBC does make mistakes. I wouldn't go as far as saying they willfully push misinformation. I think that the CBC tries to do good work. I mean, if you want to know what it means to willfully push misinformation, just listen to Fox News and listen to the commentary and how they cover certain things related to Trump. You know what misinformation is at that point, right? But do the conservative anchor do the CBC's anchors have biases and do they cover things from a certain perspective? Yeah, I mean, definitely. I mean, even you guys, as you listen to me, if you listen to me long enough, you'll know what, even if I try and hide my positions, I try and be neutral on this channel, you guys probably know where I stand on certain things. I mean, the truth in the end, and I'll tell you this for free, is I'm actually a centrist in my point of view. I have some opinions you might think are conservative, and I have some opinions you might think are more progressive. It's just the way I am, right? So that's why I decided to create a channel that was a bit more neutral for everybody, so that everybody can get involved. Jamie says, I'd rather have CNN versus Fox News situation rather than left censorship loving regime funded by taxpayers we currently have. You know, that's a different point of view. I can respect that. And obviously that's your preference, so I respect that. But increasingly, I think what you notice is that the alt media, like Rebel News, is a good example. Now you realize that the alt media, those non-mainstream types media channels right now that are getting pretty big, I must add, a lot of those are very right-leaning. For some reason, there's been this movement in the alt media towards the right, and somehow, for me, because I listen to both those systems, they kind of balance out, right? They kind of balance out for me. The problem, the reason why I say don't defund the CBC is because, at the very least, the CBC has to uphold some standards of journalism. They have to, right? They can actually get sued if they, misrepresent certain pieces of information. Now, as a YouTuber, the standard that people operate on some of these alt media channels, they can say anything, and literally I've come across a bunch of nonsense. I try not to call people out too much on this channel, but I've come across a whole bunch of nonsense on alt media. So they have a lot lower standards of practice. So in that sense, I'm not a fan of cutting everything and letting everybody fend for themselves that way, because trust me, the media is going to behave very differently when they're for profit as against when they're just there to serve the people. Solomon Ajay says Trump isn't all bad, just disorganization. His worst policies are a result of rushing. That is very true. Grant Johnston says conservatives always increase poverty and inequality as part of their so-called philosophy. Again, it's all facts you can read on the internet, but conservatives don't like reading, especially facts. Whoa, that's brutal. Braveheart says MC is very capable. There's no doubt about it, but he always looks like someone having something to hide. He does look hella guilty sometimes. That's a good shout. Trust me, if you want to see what a guilty man looks like, just ask Mark Carney about his assets real quick. Mine, you see him start to fidget all over the place, and maybe he doesn't have anything to hide. Maybe he doesn't, but he always looks like a man with something to hide when you ask him a question he's uncomfortable with. Anyways, so he says PP is more aggressive. Braveheart goes on to say PP is more aggressive, but I feel like what you see is what you get, and that's a little bit of the draw with him. That's a little bit of the draw with Pierre Poilievre for sure. But whether he is actually doing the right thing in terms of, I think I'm getting caught in the comments here. If I keep reading all these comments, I'm going to skip some comments just so I can get everybody in. and then we'll go back to what we're supposed to do. You guys are getting involved, and I really want to respect everybody's opinion, but I don't think I can cover everything. Grant Justin said it sounds like I have a lot of Fox News fans in the chat. I just might. EP says CBC is not Korean type propaganda. Whoa, that's a big charge, That's a big charge. Boogeyman says Trudeau destroyed Canada's economy, massive debt deficits, massive inflation. I know what we need to fix it. Trudeau's financial advisor. People complete. I'm not gonna call people that on the stream here. Anyways, here's what I would say though. I think people fixate on the deficit too much, and I made a video about this. The deficit is not the problem, and I'll explain that. What the big problem is what the government spends the money on, right? If they spend money on stuff that generates like GDP, then the spending is not the problem. Think about it as, say, for example, you're a realtor or something, you're a real estate developer. You will borrow money, and at any point in time, you'll probably be in debt. But the idea is you're borrowing money in order to generate cash flow in the future, right? So it's not the spending that's the problem. It's not the deficit that's the problem. It's the fact that the Trudeau government, especially obviously during COVID, they were spending money on a bunch of things that weren't bringing money back. That's the problem right there. No, it's not the deficit that's the problem. It's not the deficit that's the problem. Anyways, Grant Johnson said Harper cut MORAD funding, cut the Navy funding, and almost sold the Five Eyes technology to the US. Okay, so that's the other thing I want to cover here. Let's go back to the platform. Obviously, what you notice if you look through Pierre Poilievres' platform enough here is you'll see that he's not focusing a lot on government investing, right? He's focusing on clearing the way so that the private sector can really get involved in growth. That's what he's doing. Now, whether you think that's a good idea or not, some people say obviously the private sector driving growth is a lot faster, and as long as the government stays out of the way, will be more effective. I don't know. That's a subjective thing. But there is that part of Pierre Poilievres' platform that is very much dependent on the private sector coming in. Now, whether in this particular climate that we're in this time of a possible recession, whether you can depend on the private sector to the same extent, well, that's a different story, right? So it's a good policy, but is it a good policy for right now? Well, that's the big question, right? That's the $1 million question. Church King. Okay, so no. Let me go back to this one. So Jamie says, why didn't the CBC retract their misinformation that led to burning of churches around Canada? So I presume you're talking about the information about the residential schools. Is that correct? If you can let me know if I've got that right or wrong. So there have been a few different pieces of information around the residential school. Obviously, that is a sensitive topic that I don't know enough about to talk extensively about right now. Obviously, there was information that there were some bodies found under a residential school in Kamloops, and it turned out, according to information, that those bodies have not actually been confirmed just yet. Again, that's not something that I know enough about that I want to comment on right now. But they did, if that is what you're talking about, they did publish a modification. This might have been something you saw on Rebel News. They did publish a modification where it says potential site of mass graves. That they did publish a correction in that sense on the CBC. Nick Frost says a mistake in a news information is normal. Fox has been taken to court for the 2020 false election claims that cost them 700 million in courts. That's information. Opinions are not news. Each station has it. That's exactly true. I agree with that. Church King said that budget is so bad that conservatives can't cut enough to balance the budget. I don't think. Well, you got to realize that the spending that Pierre Poilievre is proposing here is mostly him, right? He can cut. He can cut what he wants here. Like he, and this is actually kind of interesting because Poilievre said he was going to keep dental care, pharmacare, and $10 a day child care. Well, that he didn't actually, as I said, he didn't actually put it in his platform. So note that when you're thinking of this number he has in terms of deficit, that number could potentially go up, right? So he's presented this best case scenario for you, but just know in your head that that number can go up. So what I'm telling you here is that his own budget here is not necessarily balanced. So I wouldn't go as far as saying this is his plan and it's not balanced. Okay, just to tell you that. The cost to produce news has gone way down, says Boniac Precision. Okay, Boogeyman says, well, okay, you know what? Let's get into Mark Carney's platform, okay? Because you guys are reacting so much, I feel like we'll be here all night. So what I want to do is I'll play you what Mark Carney said about Pierre Poilievre's platform first, and then you guys could, and then we'll look at Pierre Poilievre's we'll look at Mark Carney's platform and see if it's okay. I'm just gonna pop that up for you guys real quick. Where's Mark Carney? Where is Mr. Carney? Mr. Carney is right here. So here's what Mark Carney said about Pierre Poilievre's platform when he was asked about it.
Canada. Numbers?
Imagine.
As much. Okay. Carney, I'm from Radio Canada. In his plan this morning, Mr. Poilievre is keeping daycare and dental care, but he proposes a much smaller deficit than yours. Don't you think that the Conservatives are going to please voters? We can't hear you. Yes. Okay. It's a plan with numbers? Imagine, for example, with regard to daycare and dental care. The Conservative platform says, okay, we'll keep them for people who already have it, but not the others. So there'll be two Canadian kinds of Canadians. A Canadian is a Canadian first. Secondly, with regard to reducing taxes, the bring it home tax cut, it won't happen. It is supposed to come in the fourth year of his mandate. This tax cut for the middle class of my party is happening now.
Let me see if I can skip to the English portion for you guys, because we don't need to hear the French part.
There's magic.
The approach is back to $10 a day child.
A prudent yet prudent Poilievre's nightmare.
There are so many phantom numbers in that platform. But let's start with the approach. With respect to $10 a day childcare, with respect to dental care, pharma care, the approach is, if you already have it, you can keep it, but no one else can have it. So we have two types of Canadians. I thought a Canadian was a Canadian who's a Canadian. In our country, that is the case. So you bet if you haven't had children and got them in, you get the point. Secondly, there's a phantom growth that comes from the sky in his platform that arrives and changes his numbers, even though he doesn't have a plan to fight against President Trump. He also has a tax cut, a bring it home tax cut that never comes home. It doesn't arrive until year 4 and 5, right when we see the need of Canadians. Our tax cut compared to his plan, I'll give you one number, is 4 times larger this year. Is 4 times larger. These numbers are a joke. We aren't in a joke. We are in the worst crisis of our lives. It takes a serious government. It takes a serious plan. It takes a plan that delivers today. It takes a plan that delivers investment. It takes a plan that grows this economy, stands up to Trump, and moves forward with the brilliance of the workers here and across Quebec and across Canada.
Wow. He just said these numbers are a joke, you know. Like, to be fair, that was a hard response. Like I was listening to that snippet like on the radio. I was like, whoa, that's hard. That's a hard line because you know that's something that you can probably on a different day could probably go viral. But in certain things, and obviously I'm sure Poilievre will look at his platform as well, and Poilievre has not held back on Mark Carney's platform. But he is right to say the tax cuts that Pierre Poilievre is offering do not actually come to full fruition until the 4th year, right? If you look at the platform, you'll see that there. That's right. And a lot of it, again, is relying on revenue that he expects to get by doing certain things, right? I read you some of that where he says revenue gain from repealing EV mandates. Well, you don't know exactly what that number is. You're making prognostications on something that you don't actually know, right? Revenue gain from repealing, revenue gain from axing the carbon tax, revenue gain from eliminating clean fuel regulations. Well, you don't know any of these things, right? You don't know them for certain. So that's problematic to actually put out a costed platform with numbers that you don't know with a lot of certainty. But you're allowed to do that under the rules. So you make the number look a little prettier, but doesn't necessarily mean anything. But then we then okay, I'm gonna get through you guys' comment and then we'll go look at Mark Carney's platform. Yeah. ABS says ask Carney about Epstein Island. I've been asking, bro. Nobody's responding. Nobody's responding about Epstein Island. What do you mean? There was this conservative channel that that said, "What's Mark Carney doing with Epstein's girl?" That was the headline. I was like, "Oh my goodness!" And this is why you shouldn't support alt media, because they don't have any standards. They'll put anything on there in order to gain some clicks. Jamie says Carney's a con. ABS says that dude's shady as fuck. Oh, I shouldn't have said that. Don't swear online, Victor. You'll get blocked by YouTube. Anyways, but I do this on videos anyway. I should probably be fine swearing on live. Anyways, ABS clearly doesn't like Carney very much. SRCX, I gotta read you because I think it's your first comment. It says Poilievre's political career is over. He will never be prime minister. Wow. You're gonna get shit for that in the comment section, I can assure you. Church King says Brookfield Dental and Associates Inc. is a registered trademark of New York State. I don't know. Somebody tell me if that's true. SRCX, why do you keep repeating the same thing, my dude? Are you a bot? Come on. ISAR 1893 says Canada first, Canada last, Canada always. I gotta say it the way Poilievre says it. Canada always. I say always, but he says always all the time. Jamie says continue to shut down the exports and development of resources from Canada, yet invest and buy pipelines in other countries. But that's all okay because he put it in a blind trust right before. So he's talking about Mark Carney and he's putting his wealth in a blind trust. VG says, look at the file name of PP's costed platform. It's April 18th. Interesting that he chose not to release it until now. That is a very great catch. You know what? I gotta dap you up for that. That's a great catch. See, there was this talk that Mark Carney's platform actually was ready, that it was actually Trudeau's platform, and then it got given some sort of like makeover or whatever, and then it got presented. And obviously, you've pointed out rightly here that the platform was actually from April 18th, but never got shown to us. And this is the problem right here. As I told you, right, you guys right off the jump, I would have loved if this platform was available. Imagine if this was available, these platforms were available before the debate. Like, we could have been talking about this all the time instead of talking about where someone buys strawberries or beef or something. This is what we should have been talking about right here. It doesn't matter if they end up not delivering on what the numbers are here, but it would have given us an idea where we were going. Imagine, so advanced polling is over today, right? Oh, sorry, on Monday, right? So a lot of people, I mean, sure, there are people who don't give a shit about like the costly platform, but there's people that have voted without all the information in front of them. Like, this could have been, so this could have, if some people, if people were really interested in balancing the budget or a lower deficit, maybe some of those people who voted between Friday and Monday would not have voted for Mark Carney, right? If people were looking for prospectively growth that is and support from the government in a time of recession, maybe those people wouldn't have voted for Pierre Poilievre, right? That's why I really hate that there's no law that mandates these candidates to produce the platform a lot earlier, right? Anyways. Wow. Benny was, this is quite a picture you're painting here. Benny was says liberals are elbows up and pants down clowns. Wow, that's a hard line. What a line that is. What a line. I'm proud of you, bro. That's such a line. Pierre Church King says Pierre is going to make significantly more cost than is being advertised. This is his win the election budget. If he gets a majority, the federal government is going to get slashed back to 2019. To be fair, he's actually going to slash the federal government down to 2015. If you look at his platform, he actually says he wants to cut. He says he wants to cut consultants and stuff back to 2015 levels. But and this is the last thing I'll say about Pierre Poilievre's platform, because we spent almost an hour on it now. Because it's obviously the reason why we've done this is because it's the one that's fresh off the press. He said he wants to reduce, and this is a line here. I got to read you exactly what he says here. He wants to reduce funding for artificial intelligence initiatives. I thought this was a little bit weird. I mean, there's all the stuff about supporting the oil and gas industry. That one depending on where you sit along the fence of whether we should be developing more oil and gas or whether we should be positioning ourselves for renewable energy in the future. That's all up in the air. I'm sure there's people that love that, right? But this part I found very, very weird. Like, why was he saying he would reduce funding for artificial intelligence? In my opinion, artificial intelligence is where the world is heading, right? So you should be investing more in that. You should be trying to drive that growth, because Canada has serious expertise in artificial intelligence, in AI, right? So why is he cutting funding for that? Again, he's leaning too far into the private sector driving the growth there. Let's talk about Mark Carney's platform. We've talked too much about this. Let's see if I can share Mark Carney's platform here, because we actually haven't talked about Mark Carney's platform at all. So let's talk about it. All right, let me go to the first page. Mark Carney's platform is obviously a lot more detailed in terms of like the table and the breakdown. In terms of pure formatting, I like the breakdown of the liberal platform, in my opinion, because it actually gives me more details that I'm looking to see in terms of, okay, where's this money going and that kind of thing. So it breaks it down into a few different sections here. So obviously these are all the baselines and the revenues and stuff like that. So that's really just the summary there. The revenue, as I told you, this top line about the tariff response is the same as what Poilievre presented in his. Here's where his own version of pie in the sky starts, right? He talks about savings from increased government productivity. Now he has a similar number as what as what Poilievre has in his own platform. He's saying he's going to be able to raise, what is this, 15 plus, so that's 28. He says he's going to be able to raise $28 billion from increasing government productivity. So Doge style cuts, and improvement of government efficiency in that way. Okay. I would say that's a little bit optimistic, but you can make of that what you will. He then divides his platform into a portion where it says unite, which includes things like nation building projects, Canada sovereignty in the north, trade diversification. So this was something I saw in his platform, but this was something that Poilievre talked about doing as well. But Poilievre did not include, as far as I could see, you can correct me if I've missed that, Poilievre did not include that in his platform, in his costed platform. Obviously, Mark Carney was a bit more granular in the way he's broken down the different parts of his platform here. I admit I like that a bit better because it gives me a bit more information. Boogeyman says government productivity is a misnomer. Jamie says don't need to reduce carbon. Our wildlife and fauna already absorbs enough carbon. Okay, so as I said, that's based on, it depends on what you believe there. You in the end, it's a matter of personal preference, I guess. Okay, so that's one thing that Mark Carney put in his platform that is not, maybe it's not represented or it's not explicitly stated in Pierre Poilievre's platform. And then he also talks about, but in contrast to let's not get there yet. So obviously that's that section, and then he talks about a secure section. So there's 4 planks to Mark Carney's platform, obviously. So there's the unite, there's the secure, which is secure. Under secure is, this is where he talks about, he explicitly says provide workers and businesses from tariff impacts. I think he means protected. That's a typo. But he explicitly actually says that in his platform, whereas Poilievre has said he will, but he hasn't necessarily broken down how much, right? But Mark Carney has obviously clearly stated that there. And there's the defense spending that you see there. There's the help for farmers, and then there's parts of this where he's talking about LGBTQ international assistance program. I'm not really sure what that means, but obviously you can trust the liberals to try and cater to as many different interests as they can. That's kind of their thing. The other plank is protect, which is providing funding for medical schools and residency positions. He wants to protect fresh water. He also put the protecting $10 a day childcare, this is what I was expecting. This is what I was expecting Pierre Poilievre to do if he was indeed going to continue $10 a day childcare, which it doesn't seem like he actually is. Okay, so this is the build is where he's talking about cutting taxes for middle class, cutting GST for first-time home buyers, and that kind of stuff. And interestingly, obviously, you see that there's provisions for clean technology, EV charging infrastructure, and that kind of thing. The interesting part, apart from diversification of trade, he also talks about this carbon border adjustment mechanism here. Those of you who don't know what the carbon border adjustment mechanism is, it's just the EU's way of carbon pricing. Essentially, that's what it is, and that's Mark Carney's justification for keeping the carbon tax on the industrial side as against axing the entire carbon tax. Because if we're going to trade with Europe, we do need some sort of form of carbon pricing system. Otherwise, we're not going to be able to diversify trade as much into Europe, which is kind of and that was kind of a big point, that a big difference between these guys, because Poilievre doesn't really say enough about how he will he says he wants to diversify, but if you're dropping the price on carbon, which is important to trade with Europe, and you're cutting all these environmental friendly approaches, then, well, that doesn't necessarily help you move in that direction, right? I want to get into your comments here. Oh yeah, Joel Inacia says, note the carbon border adjustment mechanism. We will all be paying that. Well, yes, but as I just explained, if you're going to trade with Europe, the carbon border adjustment mechanism is actually important if you're going to trade with Europe, and to some extent, even Asia is starting to adopt similar policies over there. So Church King says, if you want to reduce our carbon footprint, stop importing plastic garbage from China. Dude, why are you calling me out, bro? Come on. Stuff is just cheaper when you get it from out there, man. What do you mean? Jamie says trees absorb carbon. That's not an opinion. That is an objective truth. Never mind the red. Okay, so I get what you mean there, Jamie. But here's the thing with that, right? We're getting increasingly more wildfires. And with industrialization as well, we're getting to a point where, we're producing a lot more carbon faster than those natural sinks are able to absorb them, if you know what I mean, right? So that in itself is a problem, right? So that's what I'll say about that. Karma says, whatever you say, it doesn't mean a thing. Carney is a well-recognized economist. He did his own. Fake news is all BS. I don't fall for fake AI, and I don't know what that means. Anyways, no matter what you do, no matter what you do, just go and vote. That's what Stephen Boateng says. Karma says bye. Okay, good. Bye. I think Sham Dog. Now, this is your first comment, so I got to read it. Canada does not need climate change. India and China does. Okay, so I'm guessing you're saying India and China are the real problems, and unless they do something about their emissions, we're just wasting our time. That is true. But interestingly, you'd be surprised how much, like, per capita, China actually has a lower emission level than we do here in Canada. Last I checked, so we like to shit on China a lot, but they actually have a rigorous carbon pricing system, which is something that Mark Carney is trying to substitute the carbon tax with, and they're obviously investing a lot in EVs and some other kind of tech in order to make their processes a bit cleaner. Are they big polluters? Of course they are, right? You're right. India and China have to buy in if we're gonna actually do and put a dent in climate change, right? Okay, so let's go back to the platform. So obviously, Mark Carney is here investing in. This is where he says he's investing in AI adoption tax credit for small and medium enterprises, and he's investing in commercialization of Canada's AI. So that's a big contrast between his position on AI and Poilievres' position on AI. I don't know. What do you guys think of AI? Or what do you guys think? Do you guys think? Okay, so one Mr. Andrew, I want to know, why do you think it? So, geez, SRCX. I'm gonna ask that you try and just try and be polite. That's the only to the people in the chat, just because I don't want to have to read insults to the people. Okay, so just please try. One Mr. Andrew says Pierre has a way better platform. Carney is a joke of an economist. So I'm assuming that the reason why you say that is because Poilievre has a lower deficit in this thing. But here's the thing, and this is the real meat of the matter here. Carney's platform, it's all a philosophical difference. Carney's platform, yes, it does increase the deficit, but as I told you, the deficit is not the problem. The deficit, it's what the kind of growth that you can drive with that deficit. Unfortunately, we spent money badly in the past, and that's why we're in the position we're in right now, right? But Carney's proposals in terms of investment, the downside to it is, again, we've spent money badly in the past, so there's PTSD from that, right? Because we spent money badly in the past, there is a chance that we will spend badly again in the future. So there's a lot of optimism that they can actually deliver and execute effectively under Mark Carney. That may not necessarily turn out to be true, right? But in terms of actually investing and possibly if both these platforms were executed perfectly, there are benefits to be had both ways. Mark Carney is trying to drive growth by so like where he says, funding for AI adoption in small and medium enterprises. One of the things he's doing there is he's trying to incentivize small and medium scale enterprises to adopt AI, which if you've used AI, if you've used ChatGPT in your work, you see that always improve, that can help with improving efficiencies, and it can help to really drive productivity. Right, so there's things like that where you might look at it and be like, okay, this is just spending and spending and spending, but really, if there's returns on that investment, it could really set Canada up for the future. Now, it depends on what if your philosophy, on the other hand, is that okay, you want to see fiscal responsibility, I think, which is what SRCX is saying, right? If you have kids and you don't want your kids to pay crazy taxes in the future, then of course you want to make sure that we're cutting spending today and we're being responsible today. The interesting thing with that, with letting the private sector really be the ones to catalyze stuff, is, well, there's certain things that we maybe overlook right now, because I mean, for everything that we say about, okay, I'll actually give you an example, right? So I think it was Jagmeet Singh that gave this example today. He said Brookfield, which is Mark Carney's old company, of course, bought a hospital, because I guess Australia was having they were privatizing parts of their health sector, and they bought a hospital or some sort of like healthcare provision business, and they ended up like really running it into the ground. Right, so that's an example. So with you got to understand that there's a very marked downside. While you can get speed out of the private sector, sometimes you're not able to control things like price. So, for example, if you sell off all the land and you let the private sector build it, well, there's no guarantees that those places that the private sector is going to build are going to be more affordable, because the private sector leaves to maximize their profits. That's what the private sector does, if you get what I mean. Yeah. So this idea that we want the private sector to speed up this and this, well, the private sector is there to maximize their profits. And if our goal is to make it so everybody is able to get ahead, well, you're just giving the rich people more resources. You're giving them a chance. You're giving them a chance to buy more market share, and you're giving the Brookfields a chance to own everything. That's essentially what privatization may lead to. Let me read your comments here. Okay. Izar says, but despite all those experiences and education, McCartney still crashed Canada's economy and Europe's economy as an economic advisor and banker. I'm sure McCartney will probably tell you that he wasn't the one in charge of the boat under Trudeau, and he only gave advice, and his advice doesn't necessarily have to be stuff that's taken. And to be fair, his justification for the UK, I wouldn't say Europe. He didn't do the whole of Europe. He was Bank of England. But his justification for Europe was essentially that he was against Brexit in the first place. So there's extenuating circumstances for McCartney there. Joel Inacia says SRCX is a troll. I blocked him on another channel weeks ago. Okay. Church King says AI is good at making fake content, and that's about it. I beg to disagree. I mean, obviously you have your own opinions there, but I think AI is the future. AI is going to revolutionize. Is going to revolutionize. That's the word I'm looking for. It's going to. It got stuck on my tongue there. AI is going to revolutionize some of the stuff we're going to do in the future. It's going to revolutionize medicine. It's going to revolutionize how we build, how we produce, everything. Right. So, if you only know of AI as something that is good for making fake content, yes, people use it to do that. But I mean, there's a lot of stuff that can be used for good, but people use for evil. Like, think of what we fear the most right now, nuclear war, right? But nuclear is also good for energy. It's good. There's good stuff to that stuff. But you can't help it that the fact that bad actors will always find a way to do bad things. It's just the way it is, right? Joel Inacia says, like the growth the liberals have supported during the last 10 years of deficits. As I said, that's the exact problem, right? McCartney is saying, I'm a new guy who can drive growth and I know how to do it. The problem with that is, well, what are the chances that it goes bad? And it goes bad very quickly. Well, the history will show you that, well, it could go really, really badly. The history will show you that it probably won't necessarily work out. Solomon Ajay says AI is going to be a huge problem in a few years. You got to clarify for me, what problems do you foresee there? Obviously there are problems with like IP theft and some of that kind of stuff, but I see potentially big gains to be had with AI, in my opinion. And we're moving to a world that is less what do I say? It's more efficiency based as against one where we're depending on other. I mean, yeah, here's an example for you, right? Like, a lot of people seem to think that China is still focused on like people-driven production. But if you see the lines in the production lines in China right now, you'd be surprised by how much technology, how much of that is that efficiency they have there is driven just by machinery and computers, right? So there's that. Boogeyman says China creates more coal burning plants than the rest of the world combined for decades now. That is true, and that is why they obviously have to buy in if we're going to do anything really. One Mr. Andrew says the deficit is a problem on Carney's platform. There is no plan on how to pay for it. Carney is worse than Trudeau. Well, he does plan to progressively reduce the first year is the biggest deficit in his platform, and he does plan to progressively reduce that. And his platform, I will be honest with you, is the only one that plans for a recession. Poilievre is not necessarily taking into cognizance the fact that we could be in a recession. Maybe we're in it. Maybe we're already in a recession. So, if you got to realize that in a recession, the private sector is not necessarily going to be as willing to put money in, because it's a dangerous time to be investing new money, right, in a recession. So that's why you notice that Carney is a lot more fixated on trying to use government money to do that, right? And his plan is that the investments will provide returns that can kind of drive GDP. And as I said, the deficit is not the issue. It's the GDP aspect of that the deficit is an issue, but it isn't an issue when you can match that to growth. That's what I'm trying to explain to you. Safe Canada says you cannot rely on your government to spend your money wisely. That's why Poilievre is right. He's putting more money in taxpayers' pockets and businesses. Okay. One Mr. Andrew says a platform without drill baby drill and pipelines is a useless platform. I guess. Tell me you're pro oil and gas without telling me you're pro oil and gas. Okay, so you are pro oil and gas. I get it. C. Bernard says Carney is the worst thing that could happen to Canada. Maybe not. Maybe not. Trudeau could be worse. You said Carney. It could have been Trudeau. You could have easily had Trudeau right now. Joel Inacia says, is Carney not a WEF guy? So he's talking about the World Economic Forum here. You will own nothing and be happy. You guys got to stop with this WEF thing. Anyways, Boogeyman says government never makes any return on investment. Well, yeah, that's fair. They do have a terrible track record, especially under Justin Trudeau. I'm not gonna lie. Church King says Klaus Schwab was just fired from the WEF for misallocating WEF funds. Interesting. Was Klaus Schwab is the guy that was saying that the COVID was the Great Reset, right? He was one that authored that, wasn't he? Yeah, Klaus Schwab is a very interesting fellow. One Mr. Andrew says, explain how AI would generate massive wealth for Canada. So you can imagine if we did develop a competency in AI, then that's jobs for certain people, right? That's jobs. That's potentially skills that we can export and make money from. So I wouldn't be so quick to just dismiss AI and say it cannot generate money that way. And it can potentially, if you also believe the fact that some of these AI data centers are going to need nuclear energy to operate, just because we don't have enough energy to cater to them, then in that sense, it can also help us develop under other sorts of infrastructure around it, like nuclear energy, right? Because there's talk that nuclear small modular reactors are going to be the way we power our AI systems in the future. So that's potentially another industry that could be an offshoot out of the AI boom. But one Mr. Andrew goes on to say oil, gas, potash, uranium, cobalt will generate massive wealth. Yes. But I think one of the problems we have right now is the US is tariffing us, and a lot of the products that you've mentioned here were stuck at this primary level of production, essentially where raw materials, we're a starting material focused country. And to some extent, Mark Carney is trying to drive us to one where we actually develop the products into more and more stages. It's trying to grow us to a point where we're a little bit more self-sufficient. To be fair, Pierre Poilievre also has the same thought, just driven in a different direction. is what I see out of Pierre Poilievre here. Boogeyman says Ontario spent 3.5 billion on solar park and sold it 2 years later. Yeah, people don't like solar has not been the best one in terms of like unfortunately there are problems that have come from I probably haven't told you guys this before, but I actually, my main career is in renewables. I'm actually a scientist. So I get where you're coming from with the solar park there. Okay. Yeah, exactly. And this is Grant Johnston says exactly what I said earlier here. Carney said that Brexit was dumb, and he did. And he weathered that as well as possible. And that's the thing, right? Yes, Carney was advisor to Trudeau. Yes, he was Bank of England governor during Brexit. But and you don't know to what extent to which his advice was taken. But I will say this: while you can present that argument, Carney does have a tendency to do this thing where when things go very badly, it's never his fault. But when things go well, i.e., when things went well with the 2008 financial crisis, relatively well compared to other economies, he was quick to say, I was involved with that. But when it didn't go so well with the Bank of England, he wasn't so forthcoming with the fact that, okay, we didn't do the right thing. He wasn't so forthcoming about the stuff that didn't go well. So that's something I've noticed that happens with Carney a lot sometimes. Safe Canada says, have I read the mission statement for Carney's WEF position? No, I have not. If you can tell me what's contained in there. Boogeyman said, England is going broke. Canada is going broke. Coincidence? Whoa, buddy. I see. I don't know. I don't know that. I mean, you could argue the world is going broke. I mean, America is not exactly smiling right now. The UK as you rightly said, is going broke, and the EU. I don't know if you could say they're in the best position at the moment right now. But maybe this whole rearm Europe business and this tariff thing is going to drive everybody to focus more on growth at this particular time. Joel Inacia says AI can only be as good as what it is fed, and that is other people's work. And but you got to understand what I'm saying to you here. There's a certain skill level that it takes to actually train an AI, right? So that's skill upskilling that can potentially that can potentially help in the new world, right? And yes, AI is as good as what it is fed. Yes. but I still maintain that AI could really be the future because we figure out good ways and efficient ways to train AI, such as the way China did with DeepSeek AI, and we can apply that to different competencies and really drive growth that way, in my opinion. Okay, let's see. Church King said, "Oh, Joel Inacia, I think I skipped your comment there. Joel Inacia says, I'm an Albertan, so part of me hopes that Carney wins." Whoa. Wait, what? No. That's a little counterintuitive. He says, I'm a burden, so part of me hopes that Carney wins. Oh, okay. So the rest of that says, you scared me there, buddy. I was like, wait, what the hell is going on here? Well, how is an Albertan saying hoping that Carney wins? But he goes on to say, we will vote yes in the referendum to create the Republic of Alberta within a year of Carney taking office. I wonder if his plan considers that. But what if he gave you a pipeline, though? I mean, what if he gave you a pipeline? Would you still think the same thing? And but apparently, though, I've seen some polls recently showing that that the Liberals are actually gaining a little bit more headway than they normally do in Alberta, which is kind of wild. They've actually gotten a little bit as well in Saskatchewan as well, which was pretty interesting. Church King says the only way for capitalism to be successful is to allow weak businesses to fail during a recession. Well, the problem with that is those weak businesses support families. Those businesses you're calling weak, those support families, right? So, you got to balance what is the cost of keeping those businesses that you perceive as weak in business. I'm sure some of them will die off for sure. But what is the cost of keeping businesses like that in business and the livelihoods that they support as against supporting the person that's out of work, right? So essentially there's a balance there to be struck between supporting productivity versus supporting the person that is, and you'll notice I think Pierre Poilievre has said that in his own speeches where he has said it's better to maintain that contact between the employee and the employer as against trying to get people back into the workforce after they've been laid off. Even Pierre Poilievre recognizes that. So I wouldn't be so quick to say you should let businesses die off. Boogeyman is being sarcastic here, I think. He says, I think if we get Carney, people will be dreaming of the good old days of Trudeau. Okay. Church King says, if we weather 2008 and 2019, everything would be affordable now and well-run and well-run corporations and small businesses would have walked out of it fine. Well, I mean, in the end, it's still a crisis, right? But, in 2008, we did recover way sooner and way better than the US, for example. 2019, you could argue we still have a lower debt to GDP ratio than the US, actually, when you really think about it. So, I mean, I know as Canadians, we like to believe that, Canada is all in the shitter at the moment. But if you really look at it in context, say you compare to our closest neighbors here in the US, our debt to GDP is still lower. And obviously, 2008 we were that one's common news. But 2019, we actually recovered a lot better than you might think. I mean, surely the big problem with the Trudeau government is that they did not match up immigration with services and with infrastructure. That was a big problem with their strategy. They were trying to restart the economy by with mass immigration, and that just didn't do any good for the GDP per capita, right? And with inflation also rising and in the same time because of their lack of fiscal responsibility. Well, we landed in this particular position now where shit hit the fan, essentially. Okay, so SRCX says PP is a con artist, nothing more. Okay. Deb Spittler, somebody else who says PP is so full of BS, and Dr. Carney is the envy of the world. He does have a lot of respect around the world. I know conservatives like to shit on him a lot. He does have a lot of respect around the world, but the fact still remains that his platform here is talking about a very, very high deficit. And sure, when it's done right, yeah, it could end up being nice. But if things go the way they usually go with a lot of our plans and our platforms in this country, that particular deficit could easily balloon to something that's unsustainable very quickly. People keep ISAR says 2008 recession, it was Jim Flaherty who contributed the most. I mean, we could play that game and say Jim Flaherty played the biggest role there, but the Bank of Canada obviously controls rates, and they're an independent organization. They're mostly independent of the government of the day. So they do control. The Bank of Canada does hold certain cards in their hands that are independent of the government of the day. And if you doubt that Mark Carney did anything, obviously you've heard Stephen Harper himself give him credit, especially when he was leaving. You saw Stephen Harper actually give credit to Mark Carney. So I mean, I know he's contesting against the Conservatives, and I know a lot of people don't like his platform, and you shouldn't, because obviously if you're on the Conservative side, that's your cup of tea. But I mean, we shouldn't discount what he did do well. Is what I'm trying to tell you. Joel Inacia says, "Envy of the world. Wow, must be good weed you have there." That's that Trudeau. That's that Trudeau material, you know. But I'm not gonna say the whole thing. I don't want YouTube to block me. Anyways, let's see what's in here. Deb Spittler says PP in Parliament is divisive and extremely rude, and that's the thing. Actually, I want to hear from you guys though. The women that are in the chat, I want to know: is it just me, or do a lot of women feel like I've heard a lot of women say this, that Pierre Poilievre gives them the ick, and I don't know what that's about. So somebody, if you're a woman in the chat, help me out. Help me understand what that even means. Okay, so Ron Beamont. Hopefully, I haven't murdered your name there. Probably shouldn't say murdered. Oh, man, I said it again. This guy. I'm not used to live streaming. Anyways, Ron Beamont says, "I don't care for Carney's idea of spending cash. We don't have. His conflicts of interest, and his book he wrote, he supports Marxism." Did he? Huh. Okay. Okay. So, I mean, again, as I told you guys, whether you choose the Carney platform or the Pierre Poilievre platform depends on what matters to you. If it matters to you that the government is fiscally responsible and that a lot of the growth comes from the private sector, which, as I said, may or may not be a good thing in terms of affordability, then Poilievre is your guy. If you care about the potential that the government is able to drive growth and GDP and really set the pace for future developments, then Carney is your guy. So it's basically a philosophical difference more than it is about the fact that one of the policies is inherently bad and the other one is inherently good, is what I'm trying to explain to you guys. Okay? Joel Inacia, you're actually right. Trudeau did give us a pipeline. The TMX from Edmonton to Vancouver. It was going to be built by Kinder Morgan for $5 million, and the federal government bought it and built it for over 34. It was going to be built by Kinder Morgan for $5 billion. The federal government then bought it and built it for over $34 billion. But I do want to. Most people kind of dispute why Kinder Morgan chose to sell the pipeline as against choosing to build it. Some people like to say that. I think a lot of people forget that Canada is a notoriously difficult place to build in, because we have these rules about. I mean, at least under Trudeau, we have these rules about environmental protection, which is a good thing. I know some people that's not very popular to say these days. And we have these rules about consulting with Indigenous peoples, which is a big concern for a lot of people with Pierre Poilievre's platform, that the Indigenous peoples are going to be sidestepped in under his platform here. But as Joel Inacia obviously rightly said there, the cost overrun for that TMX expansion was very bad. Like, and that's the problem I was saying with Mark Carney's platform right here, right? Because it's all well and good if the government wants to drive development in a certain way, but imagine if Mark Carney's platform, which currently says, 130 billion dollars is what they're going to operate in terms of a deficit. Well, imagine if that goes out of control. Imagine what that deficit could be in 4 years, right? So that's always the scary part of the government trying to get involved with things like that. Okay, so Boogeyman says doubling the price of housing sure did not help anyone but people like Mark Carney. Well, the problem again is if you allow the private industry to build it, well, there's hardly an incentive for them to build it in a way that's affordable for the common man, right? So there's hardly any control for the government in that way either. Grant Wagner said liberals can't run on their record. Carney has to pretend he has a role with Harper's policy in 08, but he did though. Anyways, okay, Ron Beeman says I didn't mention that there's a lot of criminal activity in the Liberal Party. Okay, allegedly. If you want to be specific about what criminal activity you're talking about, then we can have more of a discussion there. Grant Wagner says the Bank of Canada doesn't make policy. No, that's not what I said, right? I said they set interest rates, and they did also help with providing liquidity as well and bailouts to banks during the 2008 financial crisis. That was their role, right? But obviously they coordinated as well with central banks around the world. So and obviously they did synergize very well with the Harper government. I'm not saying the Harper government did not have a role, but I'm also saying that the Bank of Canada also played a role, in which case you have to acknowledge what Mark Carney did during the 2008 financial crisis. Braveheart says, I will discount what Mark Carney did in 2008 because he denied the failure of Brexit. And that's exactly what I was saying. Well, if you're being fair to him, though, he did not support Brexit. And it's just like your boss making a decision that you don't agree with. Well, there's really nothing for you to do. You gotta go along with it, right? Because that's your boss. so that's kind of the justification that he takes there. Noggle Snuggle, I'm guessing you're one of the ladies in the chat. Noggle Snuggle says, more ick from Carney. Well, that's not what the lady that was shouting "Lead us, Big Daddy" was saying in the rally. Come on. So I'm assuming you're not the lady that was saying "Lead us, Big Daddy" to Mark Carney then, eh? All right, fair enough. Okay, Boogeyman says. Okay, I'm not really sure what Boogeyman is saying there. Ron White says, we ain't got any money. That we don't. That's the very definition of what a deficit is. We don't got money. Deb Spittler says, PP has learned to be on the dark side of politics. PP doesn't have a solid plan on anything except to deregulate and privatize. More money in the pockets of the rich. People, what about the climate? Well, Deb, the climate is not a very popular thing these days. It's not so popular to talk about the climate these days. And that's unfortunate. Because I mean, if reducing the deficit is truly about having a future for our kids, well, what is the climate is also part of that equation, right? But it is what it is. Unfortunately, the climate is not a very popular topic these days. Boogeyman says, Quebec loves oil money, but they just don't want it more. But they just don't want it moved efficiently. Quebec loves oil money, but they just don't want it moved efficiently. And I'll be honest with you guys, this part pisses me off about Quebec, right? They're fine with getting oil. It's not like they, I mean, they have hydro and that kind of stuff, but they're fine with getting their oil supply from U.S. pipelines, and yet they oppose like a cross Canada pipeline. That pisses me off because that very act, I feel like there's a little bit of hypocrisy to that, because like if you're gonna get oil from the Americans, then what's wrong with getting oil from within Canada, right? And support the country as a whole, in building sort of an energy in building energy sustainability. And the crazy thing is that it seems they're also against nuclear power, which is something that I didn't know about until the debates. I think it was Yves-François Blanchet that was making the point that Quebec doesn't want nuclear power either. So I'm like, come on, guys, like you guys gotta participate, you know. Okay, so Joel Inacia says, do I realize that the TMX is a replacement for the original pipeline that was there and it was functioning for 60 years? It was not a new project. Kinder Morgan ran because of the election of Trudeau. Okay. I don't think that is true, but I'm not going to argue it. As far as I know, a lot of the problems that came from that were because of problems with consultation with First Nations. That's what I know. But again, I'm not going to argue that. Boogeyman says free market can easily bring down prices of housing. No problem. Government regulation is the only cause of housing increase in prices. You know, in my mind, I kind of disagree with that. I'm going to push back a little bit. Government regulation is the reason for things like slow building of housing. But in terms of increasing prices, well, it's more of a, in my mind, it's more of a demand and supply equation, right? There's obviously been this increase in demand because of the influx of people into the country. And on the other hand, we haven't matched that with infrastructure. So from just rudimentary economics, when you have a high demand for something and not enough supply, well, prices go up. In your assertion that the free market can easily bring down prices, well, when have you ever heard that the corporations are willing to cut their I mean, from the supply side, yes, but in terms of what happens in practice, the corporations are not going to willingly give you their profits. Like, think about the price of groceries. When's the last time you saw the price of groceries come down? Right? During COVID, we could have said, oh, the reason why the price of groceries was up was because of supply chain issues. Well, since they haven't come down, they haven't come down, right? And there was obviously talk of like price gouging during inflation, right? So corporations are not the most willing to give up their profits so that you can benefit. That's just all I'm gonna say about that. Joel Inacia comes back at me and is telling me about liberal criminal activity with the We Charity, with SNC Lavalin, with Arrive Canada. Yeah, okay, fair enough. You got me there. They work out quite a few scandals. Yes. Okay, fair enough. There was quite a bit of I wouldn't call it corruption because there was no court case. There was nobody has been charged with anything. But I do know Arrive Canada, the bill kind of really ballooned up and people were really mad about that. And obviously, oh yeah, let me tell you guys something interesting with SNC Lavalin. And you guys who have watched the channel for a while might know this fact. But did you know that the high-speed rail project that Justin Trudeau proposed before he left office, the one between I think it goes from Quebec City to somewhere in Ontario, that high-speed rail project, Did you know that the company, or one of the companies that's part of that Cadence consortium that got that project, actually happens to be SNC-Lavalin? It just and it's funny that mainstream media hasn't been talking about this, because it really bugs my mind that flew under the radar for so many people. Because one of the companies in that Cadence consortium that Trudeau allocated that contract to happens to be a company known as Atkins Realis. And Atkins Realis happens to be the new name of a company that used to be known as SNC-Lavalin. I bet you didn't know that. It was a wild thing I found the other day, just doing some research for a video. Anyways, Snuggle says the lady that says leaders Big Daddy to Mark Carney has daddy issues. That's the crux of many love stories, you know. Many love stories come from daddy issues. What do you mean? Boogeyman says climate seems normal. I mean, for people that have to deal with wildfires and flooding will probably beg to disagree. Jolie Nasia says weatherman cannot say for certain it is going to rain tomorrow, but long-term climate change is real. Does nobody realize the stupidity of the whole premise? That one I need to think about what you're trying to say here a bit more. The weatherman can, so you're saying they can't predict that it's going to rain tomorrow, but long-term climate change is real. I mean, no. So here's what I'm going to say to you, right? Long-term climate change is real because we see it around us. I mean, you see the Arctic ice melting. So climate change is not the problem, right? In terms of that's not the leap in terms of what you want to believe. The big leap is when, or the leap, I shouldn't say it's not a big leap, but for some people it is pretty big. The big leap is when you get to the point where you're asking, do humans contribute enough to, because the climate is always changing. That's a fact. So for some people, the question is always, do humans contribute enough to the climate change that it is a problem? Or on the other side, can humans do anything about actually reducing climate change? Because that's the other part of that, right? So in terms of whether climate change is real or not, it's real. Whether it's human caused or not, well, there's a few debates about that. Whether humans can do anything about it, that's the other debate, right? But climate change is real, right? You can see that everywhere around you. You see that with progressively hotter climate. You see that with Arctic ice melting. Climate change is real. Okay. Braveheart says, according to your reasoning, Mr. Wolf, he shouldn't claim glory either. Okay, you're still on this whether Mark Carney should be praised or not. Okay, Sonia, that's a new person. I haven't read a comment from you yet. Sonia says Canada produces 1% of the world's emissions. I believe in climate change, obviously, but taxing us to death won't fix climate change. You know what? That's true. There needs to be a balance there. There does need to be a balance there. And I think what we're seeing with, even to be fair, and people won't give Mark Carney credit for it, and I don't know what he will end up doing in actual fact, but his platform here is showing that he wants to be pragmatic, right? Obviously, he has not included any revenue from the consumer side of the carbon tax. And I explained to you the reason why he is keeping the industrial side of the carbon tax, which is basically because it is possibly a requirement for trading with Europe. That's why he's keeping that side of the carbon tax. And he seems to be open to a pipeline, short of the fact that obviously Quebec doesn't want a pipeline, that's the way. And fortunately or unfortunately, you have to have a consensus, which is where we always run into a problem in Canada. You have to have a consensus across First Nations, across all the provincial jurisdictions, in order to get a pipeline across Canada. That's the fortunate or unfortunate reality of what Canada is, and that that tends to make things difficult to build here in Canada. Deb Spittler says PP has a very insincere and condescending quality about him. So I guess she's talking about the way why she gets the ick from Pierre Poilievre. He talks down to women, and PP has voted down 5 times women's rights to choose. And that's the thing. So the problem is I'm sure there are women that support Pierre Poilievre, but increasingly I hear stories similar to what Deb is saying here about Pierre Poilievre, and you really need that, and that's part of where he's really trailing, because I mean, well I don't remember the exact percentages now, but women constitute maybe about 50% of Canada's population, close to. You need that vote. You need that vote, right? Yeah, from the voting population, from the voting bit of the women population. You need that vote. But beyond that, you also need to stand for something that people can actually get behind. You need to stand for something that people agree with. And it just turns out that it seems like for a lot of women, I shouldn't say for women, that's a gross generalization. For a lot of women, something about him doesn't sit right. Imugi, that's a new person, says the issue with liberal climate policy is that they think solar, wind, and wind power solves everything, even though manufacturing and maintaining that technology is both polluting and expensive. That is true. With solar, I told you guys, my main career is actually in renewables. With solar, the big issue with it is after the solar runs its course, for example, disposing that material and figuring out how to recycle it effectively creates a problem down the line. For example, with batteries in cars, which is something I know a little bit about. With batteries in your electric vehicles, the big issue with that is, well, obviously those batteries are getting better now, but back maybe not even 5 years ago, they would give you 10 years on those batteries, and unlike a fuel car where you can sort of just like easily like swap out parts and stuff like that, if the engine of your EV goes to shit, there's a lot of money, there's a lot of cost there to replace the batteries. Basically like buying a new car at that point. And as at that time, and even right now, there's not enough technological development into like being able to recycle the battery aspects, the battery aspects of an electric vehicle. So that ends up being polluting in itself as well, right? Anyways, I don't want to get too much into the nerdy stuff. You guys don't need that. Boogeyman says, I know lots of builders, they all want to build more houses. The only thing stopping them and slowing them down is regulation. Again, you're not taking my point here. What I'm saying to you is that, yes, you're right, you can increase the speed, but more than that, how does that improve the affordability? It's not just about building, it's about making those things affordable for people to buy. So if you increase the supply, well, does that mean that the prices are going to drop? Well, not necessarily, because the private sector is geared towards profits. Infinite Dance says, okay, I don't know what Infinite Dance said there. Infinite Dance says, as far as I have seen, the beloved CBC woman reporter got humiliated by Carney. I have never seen. Okay, I'm not really sure which woman reporter, but Mark Carney did have a few altercations with women reporters, but it wasn't about their rights as women. Okay, and which is what Deb is saying here. Deb is talking specifically about the rights of women. The altercation that Mark Carney had with the reporter was more so talking about things like, what was it now? It was when he got asked about his assets, for example, or when he got asked about, or the other time yeah, it was about his assets and his blind trust. Those were really the two questions where he snapped, which is part of the guilty thing that I said. Mark Carney has a tendency to look guilty when you ask him a question he's uncomfortable with. Snuggle says, I've seen Carney talk down to women. Oh, interesting. I've seen Carney talk down to women more than Pierre has ever talked down to any woman. I get the sense that Pierre respects smart women. No, I have no doubt that, and this is something I think people fail to realize. Pierre actually is a lot more classy than a lot of people give him credit for. And here's where I really started to notice that. When Justin Trudeau resigned, he could have said, something really wild on his way out. He could have said, something really, really nasty on his way out. But really all he said was good luck to him and his family. And he hasn't really he hasn't attacked Trudeau with the same kind of like vim that he was attacking him when he was his opponent, So I don't know. I get the feeling that Poilievre is a lot more classy than people give him credit for. Simon 2 said Quebec is screwing Canada over and over again. Sometimes I feel that way. I'm not gonna lie. Like, a lot of people talk about these transfer payments that they get and all that kind of stuff, and a lot of people talk about how they clearly are not making a secret of the fact that they want to leave Canada, and all of that stuff, but and they keep fighting against a lot of stuff. They keep vetoing a lot of stuff that could potentially help the rest of Canada. Sometimes a lot of these projects are things that maybe the rest of Canada already agrees on, but just Quebec gets veto power because we want to keep them so desperately. And I trust me, I'm all for keeping Canada whole. I don't want Quebec to be a separate country. I don't want Alberta to be a separate country. But the problem there is it then makes it difficult, especially when you have like conflicting points of views like that, where Quebec, is more focused on renewables and Alberta is more focused on oil and gas. When you get conflicting points of views like that, it can make it very difficult to come to a consensus in this country, which is the exact problem that we're seeing, right? DHK123 says climate change is real, but there's no viable solution as of now. Our tech is not advanced enough as the planet. We're getting there. As a person who works I work in my career is in R&D, in renewables, and also in stuff that relates to the tech of renewables. Yes, our tech is not quite there yet. Things like carbon capture have not been shown to work at scale. So yeah, that's a fair point, right? But can we? I guess the question is, can we slow down climate change enough to allow the technology to catch up? That's the big question, right? Isa says, ISAR1893 says, if mainstream media cannot do their job properly, they shouldn't be kept relying on Canada's tax money. Well, that's a fair point. But I would wager, in my opinion, I think CBC does a good job. But obviously, I respect your opinion there. Boogeyman says most First Nations people want pipelines. Okay, you say that now. SRCX asks, what is my specific scientific background? Okay, I'll tell you guys that, since you guys asked. I'm a chemist. I work in lithium-ion batteries. So the batteries that go in your electric vehicles, that's what my career is in. So I do a lot of research into that technology. And I know that's unrelated to politics, but politics is something I enjoy talking about. So I do this for fun. It's just something I find interesting. That's all. That's why I do this. So that's my specific. That's my scientific background. SRCX. I don't talk about it a lot because it has nothing to do with politics, which is something I enjoy talking about. Hind Grinder says portable energy and the supply chain make life in Canada possible as we know it today. Without it, it is back to life as it was prior to. Okay, all right. Let's see. Right now, maybe I'll focus on people who I have not heard anything from, and so that way, I think we're running a bit long now. We're already 2 hours over. I should be looking to end the stream here. And I want us to do a quick roundup on the platforms. We started off talking about platforms, but I did say today was going to be about you guys' opinions. As I said, don't worry. I'm gonna do a video with my opinion, and you guys can see that on the channel. If you haven't subscribed yet, go ahead and subscribe so that you see that video when I make it. I'm actually on a race to get to 1,000 subscribers. And then maybe I can. Maybe SRCS was asking me what my career is. Maybe once YouTube starts to pay me, maybe I can make YouTube my career. We'll see. I'll abandon all my training as a chemist, and and become a full-time YouTuber. Make that YouTube money. Anyway, anyways, Hind Grinder says economy of scale prohibits our ability to move the supply chain to EV. I'm not necessarily sure I follow what you mean there. Are you saying we can't scale up EV production here in Canada? I mean, the supply chain is not established yet, but as I said, as someone that is working that works in that industry, we're working. Part of Trudeau's investments, for example, was in trying to grow that industry and build a supply chain. That was partly the reason why we put 100% tariffs on Chinese-made electric vehicles, right? So the idea was to try and build out that supply chain. It's partly the reason why Trump is trying to tariff China right now, because he wants some of that production. I mean, Tesla already produces some things in the US, but he wants a lot more market share there. Pure PK says after Carney finished as governor of the Bank of England, the English had an average drop of minus 35,000 GDP per capita. I swear people just don't know how to Google anything. Come on, Pure Peak. Anyways, Imugi, who is someone I haven't heard from yet, says one argument against Poilievre voting against social policies is that the way the Liberals implement them waste a lot of time and money with little to no results. Well, the problem with that is in his own platform, he hasn't necessarily proposed any social policies, right, in his platform here. And arguably, if we're heading into a recession, you're going to need to support people. So if you're not proposing social policies in your platform to support people, then what are we doing here, right? So the question, the big question with this is Poilievre's plan here meeting this moment of possibly a recession, possibly a time when businesses and people are going to need support? It's a good plan, but is it a plan for this moment? Is the real question, right? Hind Grinder says 1 million people in Ottawa, 4 people to a home equals 250k homes. Okay, you're doing a lot of math there that I don't know if I can follow live. You're counting letters and all sorts and 25. Come on, bro. Don't do this to me on live, man. Don't do this to me live. SRCX says, any questions, just ask. Physics 250. Okay. Oh, are you it looks like SRCX is a physicist, are you? Can't say I love physics very much. I didn't like physics in school. I did not like but surprisingly, it might surprise you to know that I'm actually a physical chemist. So a lot more related to physics than I would like. But But there you go. Anyways, I do not like physics a lot though. Everyone with an EV also has a fuel car that they mostly use to travel. So it is just making more cars, causing more environmental damage and increasing the carbon footprint. But here's the thing though, the technology is getting better. I mean, the Chinese, for example, and this is where a lot of people they like to shit on the Chinese, but they don't realize just how far ahead those guys are, right? They're building technology for EVs that are able to charge in minutes. That's the technology of the future in electric vehicles, right? And even Mark Carney in his platform here is talking about also developing EV infrastructure, EV charging infrastructure. So there is a point there where, you know, if we can improve the technology of EVs and improve the infrastructure around that, then, you know, EVs can really be, you know, get to a point where they can actually replace fuel cars. Maybe because imagine, and this is the goal that we have in my industry here, where if you're trying to get to say you're trying to get from here to Alberta, for example, right? Now, if you stopped at the gas station and you were trying to charge up your vehicle, well, you know, that if you were fueling up or just a fuel car, that's 5 minutes, right? But now we're working on getting an EV to be able to charge in similar amount of time as the amount of time it will take you to fuel your car. Again, look at me, I'm getting into nerd talk again. Let's not do this today, okay? Let's not do this. I do want to round up here. You guys have been absolutely magnificent tonight. I mean, I wasn't planning to go this long, but we've gone we've gone over 2 hours, and I still want to make that video for you guys tonight. So I will. You guys, when you see that, when you can obviously still add your comments in the conversation here. But when you see that video, if you have not subscribed yet, as I told you earlier, go subscribe. But when you see that video, I want to see your opinions. Take your time, go through the platforms. I've told you here, you know, depending on what your perspective is, there's no evil platform between these two. I know it's easy to look at Mark Carney's platform and just see the deficit, but I've told you there's levels to what where you can really see that. Anyways, Simon 2 is asking, why can't we scale up our electricity by that much? I'm not sure what your question is. Well, part of the problem, and this is the last thing I'll say, and then I'll end it there. Part of the problem here is that so I don't know if you're in BC, but we have a bunch. We just the CBC Dam was just commissioned not too long ago, right? In order to have enough infrastructure to power all the electric vehicles that it would take to completely replace like fuel cars, internal combustion engines, you would need quite a few of those CBC dams, and the other problem with EVs and charging infrastructure is a lot of those charging infrastructure, especially not in Canada. In Canada, they're mostly powered by hydro, but in places like China, they use coal for that, which is not clean, right? So if you're using coal to power your EV, then what's the point, right? Anyways, you guys have been amazing tonight. I'll try and go live if another topic comes up, but I thank you guys for joining me tonight. And yeah, I'm just getting distracted by the comments here. I'm going to close that now. I shouldn't say much. Thank you guys for joining me tonight. I'll see you next time. Take care, guys. Have a good night.